also Owechitibwa Israel Mayengo is going to be talking to us about lots of issues, ranging from the politics, economics, and anything that has to do with issues in Uganda, basing on how COVID-19 has affected us. You are welcome on the show.
Thank you very much.
Getting you to the issues that are happening in Uganda currently, the government of Uganda promised to start food distribution that will be given to the vulnerable people in Kampala and Wakiso. They targeted over 2 million Ugandans, but as we speak right now, depending on the outcry of the Ugandans, it is sincerely shown that many people have not yet received the food, and yet we have a mask distribution that was promised to Ugandans. What's your take about this issue?
It's a monumental undertaking. You see, if you went around and distributed food for 2 million people, each getting, let's say, 1 kilogram, after about two days, a kilogram would be finished. And then you have to come around again and distribute another 2 kilograms to each for another 2 days. So I think they were undertaking something which is literally impossible under the circumstances. First of all, they don't have stores in which they're keeping food for whatever sort of emergencies. Secondly, the suppliers are also not fixed and they are not quite certain. Third, I don't think that the money is so regular. The food which was being distributed, we don't know whether it was being paid for from the treasury or from the gifts people were contributing. So it was one of those rather hasty decisions that the government must have undertaken. They tried, I must admit, but at the same time, once you do it, you have to continue doing it because the eating does not stop.
How sure are we that the government will be able to provide masks to over millions of Ugandans who are above 6 years of age?
That also, but that is a little bit easier than the food because they don't have to supply a new mask for every couple of days. They are talking of masks which are reusable. So I think they must be thinking of masks which will be manufactured and be made of materials that can be washed and be reused. All the same, it will be wise to give a person 2 masks. So when he washes one, he leaves that one at home drying, and he wears the one he has, and then does the opposite the next day. So I think it's easier to get the masks. But then I have noticed that they are costing about 3,500 shillings when I am seeing some on the roadsides being sold for 1,000, even 500. So this being a country in which corruption has become so rampant that people suspect corruption everywhere, it could even be that there are some people who are making some profit out of the masks.
That could be the case because people were arguing over the fact that the money used to distribute the masks is way too much than the cost of these masks.
I heard of a figure of 81 billion shillings for the first batch of masks, not all the masks. And I wondered how much would be the cost of each mask. And these were not imported masks, although of course the materials are imported. The materials are imported, but I do think that the actual manufacturers must be one of our companies around here. So, you see, when our wise friend wrote the big book, Gone with the Wind, one of the ideas was that some people make profit when there is an emergency, others lose something. So it might be that out of the misfortunes that are befalling the people, some people are making a fortune out of it. And it's a high possibility. The government has been suffering from the problems of corruption and all kinds of impropriety. So I would not doubt the suspicion that some people must be making a buck out of this mischief.
Rather, when they see the police people and the law enforcement officers coming in, they rush to get them and just put them on.
First of all, even the doctors themselves are not all in uniform as to the appropriateness of using the masks. Some are saying masks are really a danger to human life in that one breathes in the same carbon dioxide he has just breathed out, and that's not good at all. Then on the other hand, others tell us that the virus is not everywhere. That is from people who are around each other or one another, and that it rides on some kind of vapor, which does not hang in the air for long. It must rest on something. The government even talked of receiving Ugandans coming back, each armed with a certificate that he has been cleared of coronavirus disease from wherever he comes. Now, who is going to enforce that? How are they going to insist that if a Ugandan is going to come out of Denmark, he must have a certificate? We are giving them certificates here, which is, I think, an unnecessary expense to say that one has been treated of coronavirus and one is now supposedly free from it, has been cured, and so hand him a certificate. Now that's an additional cost for printing certificates, which are totally unnecessary. Who is going to ask for them? You see, some of our governments have unnecessary wastes. And the waste is it's a kind of a tradition. So almost in so many places that waste. Yesterday I went to Mulago Hospital, and I looked at the gate at the entrance. The cost of constructing the gate is enough to construct a small hospital in a district out there in the Eastern Province. The gate which enters Parliament cost enough money to build a small district office in Western Uganda. These vanity, the Baganda call it okwejalabya, just unnecessary. So anyway, it's a lot of these things. So the returning Ugandans, first of all, it's important that the government recognizes the value of a citizen. Get one American lost here in Uganda, and you see the American embassy will not sleep. They will insist we must find him, and until you prove that actually he went to the he went to the national park, and the lions ate him up. Then they will relax. But just to be told that an American, whether he was a tourist, a businessman, a student, anyone just visiting, and he just disappears here, the American embassy will say, no, we must find him. I do remember when I was a student in America, North Korea captured 90 soldiers, American soldiers, and the Senate passed a resolution that they are going to rescue the 90 young men that North Korea had taken, whatever it would take, even if it would take the entire destruction of North Korea. They were prepared to ban North Korea from border to border with napalm to recover the 90 boys that were there. They know the value of the citizens. But here, on many occasions, even the embassies which are overseas do not care whether a Ugandan is having problems or not. The embassy will say, well, we have nothing to do with that. We do not know how to rescue you. And you wonder for what purpose we have embassies in some of these countries. So the countries, at the moment, many who are stranded in those overseas places, many of them did not have the intention of being there for a long time. They might have gone there on business, and then coronavirus caught up with them, and they were blocked there. Now they might have gone with a certain amount of money to keep them for the period they had intended to stay. Now the money might have run out. Could they run to the embassy and say, here we are, I'm a Ugandan, I had come here for 2 weeks, it's now 2 months, and I don't have money anymore. I can't even ask my people at home to send me some. Could I be rescued? I don't think that a Ugandan ambassador and his team would find an answer to that. So we have to value our citizens.
that is a great thought. I know people out there understand what valuing a citizen is right now, because it's a lot of money that's been spent by our fellow Ugandans in quarantine. But getting away from that, we have seen changes in transport reforms in Kampala ever since the lockdown started, the partial lockdown started. They introduced the smart buses. I should say they are quite efficient. They gave us just a sneak peek on those buses, and they told us they're going to bring about 97 of them right from the start, and they're thinking of getting the taxis to the rural areas and borders, just loading stuff everywhere. What is an ordinary Ugandan supposed to do at this time where we don't have efficient public transport for Muntu wa wansi, as we call it? What is the future of that?
I don't know whether I should call myself an ordinary Ugandan or not. but the question is, I haven't seen any of those buses. But I stay here out in the village, so it's difficult for me to see those buses. Now, that is another thing. Here is a minibus in which the government is insisting that it should take half the passengers it used to take. What's the reason? Because when it takes a full load, they will infest one another with the coronavirus. Yes. Not only that, everyone in the minibus must wear a mask. If the masks are relied upon, then why worry about one being a meter from the other? In any case, where are you going to get space good enough for some 6 people in a minibus? If you say there must be 2 meters between each of the passengers, obviously it's impossible. So I think it's just a waste. It's some kind of rush decisions which are made before, officials take good thinking about what they're deciding. So as far as the buses are concerned, I don't know. It's still the same reasoning. If the bus was supposed to carry 70 passengers, and they're saying it must now carry only half, which is 35, still the only gap which is left between the passengers is not big enough to satisfy what they're claiming should be the distance between the space between the two, keeping what do they call it? Keeping so-called social distance. I don't know why do they call it social distance? Economic distance. whatever they call it, it's impossible to maintain that. Okay, let's keep them where it's possible. In queues going to a bank, okay, they can keep social distance, one following the other. There's no hurry. But in these mini buses, I think it's just a matter of saying that perhaps something effective will happen to prevent the spread of the virus to the people. And they are still worried about more of that than they're worried about the ordinary pollution, the transport buses, these mini buses and the motorcycles bring about in the towns. I think people know that in East Africa, Kampala is the most polluted town. And the greatest pollutant here are probably those motorcycles. You can see them just puffing out fumes as they pass. And when the government decided to check on the fumes of motor vehicles, they established correction points, stations for checking on the pollution of vehicles only in Kampala. Now, would a man or anyone who has a car in Kotido have to drive it to Kampala to check on its pollution and the emission control? You have to drive it because there are 5 of those stations on the main roads, one on Entebbe Road, one on Masaka Road, one on Bombo Road, one on Jinja Road. Now, those are the only ones. So, do I have to drive my car all the way from Koboko to bring it to one of those stations so that we check on the pollution. So the pollution is also another problem that we have around here, apart from the pollution of the virus. That's another pollution.
But the issue of borders, it is a very, very big issue right now. Looking at how effective they are, most people use them to rush everywhere, do this and that. But then if they are to just they are used to just transfer luggage from here to there, how will it affect some people who've been using them?
The people have been using them, and the conditions of the moving around in these towns. I mean, granted that we have roads which were intended to be village roads, and they are the ones in the city, you know. One lane going this way, one lane going that way. So the matter of congestion in town is what makes the borders almost indispensable, because the sheer degree of traffic jam is so much that it literally drives people crazy. It's difficult to keep time with traffic jams here. So one says, okay, let me leave the car, or even let me leave the minibus, come on, and ride a border to get there. So the border thus becomes almost indispensable. However, we have to work on the city. I don't know what can be done on this city. As a matter of fact, if I were to have a suggestion, it's a pity that they never turned Namamve into a branch of Kampala, a newer one, as it would not be the first one. The city of Rome here in Italy has both an old part and a new part called Eure. You get to New York City, it has the old part down in the southern part and the newer part in the Manhattan area. So people wake up at a time and start designing more suitable, roads, suitable spaces in the cities. Here, nobody's worried about these designs at all. They're only repairing the roads which were established for the carrying of bicycles long time ago, and people just walking around. I wouldn't say we had horses. I have never seen people relying on horses around here. and I don't think that anybody even thinks that there ever was a time here when people relied on horses. They did not. But the roads were designed, not designed even, they just happened to grow. What used to be a small path became a road, And that's why they go zigzag, zigzag. The most idiotic thing that you can think of is how the city council, if any exists, allows people to build walls right up to the curve, right up to the curbs of the streets, and leave streets so small that two vehicles can hardly pass each other. That's happening in my village here. So we have a lot of things. Sometimes you hear of engineers, city council engineers, and say, my God, they take ordinary clerks and turn them into engineers. Because I don't think that an engineer would fail to realize that water goes where the slope goes. I mean, if they realize that, how would we have floods in town?
We wouldn't have any.
And it's not only in Kampala that rains. It rains all over the world. And you don't see floods in towns all over the world. But here, after it has rained, go near the clock tower. We have had people drowning right there. Leave alone the sheer negligence of the city council, where they leave holes gaping and filled up with water sometimes. People drop in those waters and they disappear. A lady who dropped in the pipe at Nakawa a month ago has not been recovered up to now.
I understand all those issues, but I want to take you away from the planning bit of it and get you to the economic recovery of Uganda, looking at the COVID-19 effect on businesses and shutting down of many businesses worldwide. Where does Uganda stand when we talk about economic recovery?
I got out of secondary school here at King's College a few years ago. And then I wasn't admitted to Makerere. I ended up at a better university. And I used to call that and told my children that it's possible to make profit out of loss. Now, out of this emergence of COVID-19, we should make profit instead of lamenting that we have lost. The way of making profit is that some of the little things that we have been importing, we can make them here. It's unfortunate that the government discourages local companies. Indirectly, they don't know, but they are discouraging those companies. First of all, corruption itself. Go to register a company, it may sometimes take months to register one. Go to borrow some money to do a business, however obvious the business is. It may even be impossible to borrow money to do it. Way back in 1975, my company represented Colgate. You know those Americans? The American company manufacture a toothpaste called Colgate. So I represented it in Uganda and Rwanda for some years. Then we decided I would make Colgate my toothpaste. It should not be called Colgate anyway, because Colgate has made such a good advertisement that people think all toothpaste is Colgate. Just as many people think that all petrol is Shell. So I applied for a license to manufacture toothpaste. Do you know the trouble I went through with the so-called licensing board, industrial licensing board, made of Africans? And they were asking, who's going to use the toothpaste? I almost asked them, is there any of you who doesn't use any bit of that? You know? Why don't you join with an old company that's been making the same product and you partner up with it? I said, like which company? They said, a company like Colgate. I said, when Colgate was starting, with whom did they partner? You know, the first thing an African sees is how to make things difficult for the other one. You know, in a sense, that makes him more important than people should think. You know, so if the government had a way of encouraging businesses, nobody now would be importing used clothes anymore. Would make ours slowly by slowly here. Encourage small businesses, a small factory like sitting in this, establishment sitting in a room like this one, and you make shirts. But up to now, we are wearing only imported shirts. Can you imagine? I do not know whether anyone makes a bra in Uganda. They are all imported, and I think most women are wearing them. I don't see many who might go without them. So there now is a market that is without doubt. Now that goes to the underwears as well. Now, the government with the Uganda Development Bank would be doing that. I recently wrote to the Minister of Finance and I said there was a building I had applied for and that I would create an investment bank in it. Not even a response. The government here, government officials don't even know that letters are meant to receive some kind of reply. Yeah. In a sense, it's an indication of corruption. If you wrote to a government official about something that's important and he does not respond, he's waiting for you to go. You have written about to get permission to put up a building somewhere, and you don't receive any response. He's waiting for you to go there, and then he will say, oh, did you write? Oh, yes, yeah. You think I must have seen your letter. But you know, we are so busy here, and not only that, we are paid so little that we have to reserve time to go and look for how to make ends meet. So can't attend to all the business. Then the businessman who has come to visit says, now listen, I have an envelope here. If you use this one for this, at least for these 2 days, then you concentrate on my project so that you don't have to go to make the ends meet, as you have said. Then the officer then says, I even realized your letter is actually here. So this type of behavior will not get us out of the economic doldrums in which we are. COVID-19, if we should make profit out of it, let people have investment in small ways and start. The companies, the countries that have developed are not having their governments employ their people. The government employs very few people. And even the big companies employ very few people. But the small companies employing 5 people, 4 people, 10, 15, those by the thousands employ the population. So the government has to encourage, small businesses to start, But, the government here has a problem. When you hear of any money which is appropriated, if you look at the budget which has just been passed, you will realize that almost half of the budget goes to defense. And defense literally produces nothing. It produces thieves, of course.
The chairman of the Electoral Commission, Justice Solomon Byabakama, announced a new roadmap, but this is to be done through print media, online, and using social media itself. The opposition is out there saying that maybe the incumbent president is the one that's gaining in this because he can access the various TV stations and radio stations, yet some candidates will not be able to get a chance to stand out there. What is the future of Uganda, looking at the fact that we are expecting scientific and campaigns for the first time?
Ugandans are excellent at creating words. We'll soon hear of so many scientific things that don't even have anything to do with the science. I cannot imagine that within the remaining period of about 6 months, any candidate who has not been in their field before can traverse this country from end to end with the poor roads that we have, with the poor means of transport that we have, with the unreliable utilities that we have. You cannot actually get any message across. It is true that people who have been campaigning for elections have been meeting, members of the public, talking to them, and even failing to get issues understood by the voters. Now, how are you going to do it in these circumstances? Using the telephones, well knowing that not everybody has got a telephone, and even some who have them do not know how to use them. And not only that, some of these telephones use electricity. What percentage of Ugandans has electricity? Very little, 15%. Out of the 42 million people in Uganda, only 1.5 million have electricity. Maybe 10. Okay, let's say 10. Oh, okay. We know that 1.5 homes have electricity, but the remainder don't. Now, those ones, how are they going to rely on their telephones? How are they going to charge them? With the solar-powered batteries, even those ones are difficult to get. So I do not really see any possibility of a scientific election. I heard someone explaining that you could have, placards and signs set all over with people walking around with a sign saying elect a so and so for president or for a member of parliament, and at the same time, of course, the police will come looking for them, that they're having unlawful demonstration. It's a very high possibility. So there is no doubt that the greatest beneficiary to the scientific election would be the existing officers of the government. Now,
But
that the president has been campaigning for the last 35 years. Now he's competing with these novices who came last year. And Romishana Charles announced his candidacy last week. Now, how is he going to campaign across this country, scientifically, even any other way? In 1980, I was here. I was vice president of EPM to begin, at the beginning. Of course, we made changes later. UPM was started in June 1980. Elections were to be at the end of December 1980. We had 6 months. And we all knew for a certainty that we did not stand a chance to win the elections. Only a few of our members would probably even try a little bit to compete for elections to parliamentary seats. Indeed, only one member of UPM was elected, Kiyonga, out of Kasese. But all the others were not elected. UPM did not have the money. UPM did not have the organization ability in such a short period to go around the country and spread the message, which we had at that time. Slightly different because UPM evolved and became NRM. Well, of course, what UPM stood for is not NRM, what NRM stands for. UPM had the motto, clean government, peace, and unity. Now, the first bit is no longer in the present government.
The clean.
You said it. Why in the world must we have elections at this time when, under these circumstances, we will not be the first in this world ever to postpone an election?
But who is supposed to enact the postponing of the election?
I'll give you an example. In 1939, the Second World War started, and for 6 years it raged. The American people had to elect a new president within that period because Roosevelt was the president at that time. His term had come to an end, the second term, and he could not stand for another one. The American Congress, which is their parliament, voted to postpone the election. There is no reason here why Parliament cannot do that. It will not be a permanent amendment to the Constitution. This is a situational resolution, decision. And the Parliament, by theory and by practice, is the whole of Ugandans put together. We all elect, here in the village, we elect our representative in this area, and we say, you're going to speak for us, you know. So I come from the Sess Islands myself. I'm not a native of here. I come from the Sess Islands, a much more civilized area. No electricity, and no thieves, no prisons. Now those ones, each one is always, no potholes. All those ones, they send their representatives, and those representatives are together. They represent Uganda. So when they decide, under the circumstances, we are going to postpone the elections for another 6 months, who will take Parliament to court? Nobody will. So,
according to the Chairman Electoral Commission, he states that the Constitution of Uganda allows the Electoral Commission to have free and fair elections in Uganda.
True, but does not say specifically that elections must be on such and such a date. Nor does it say that when conditions do not permit, you may have a change in this particular requirement. I give you the example of the most important, the most revered written constitution on earth, that of the United States. It requires elections, and their president must have a term of only 4 years. No more than a third term, only 2 terms. In 1939, during the Second World War, Delano Roosevelt was the president. His second term came to an end. They could not hold an election because it was wartime. Congress passed a resolution to postpone the elections. That was a one-time only situation. And there's no way, there's no reason why our parliament, which is the representation of all of us together, does not have the authority to see the impracticableness of holding elections at the moment and decide to postpone it. It does not mean to give it up entirely, but to postpone. Suppose we had a war now. It's so serious that it would be impossible to organize elections. Definitely, there would even be no time for Parliament to sit. People would just run out of towns and probably wherever they would be holding the elections and hide in their villages. At the end of the war, they'll come around to see what the constitution were talking about elections. So Parliament, to quote the British saying, Parliament can do anything except changing man into a woman.
That is how powerful they are.
That's how powerful Parliament is. It can do anything. And what they do with elections under the present circumstances is not a permanent measure. It will not be an amendment to the Constitution. If there is want to be an amendment to the Constitution, it is also possible. It's possible to add something in that Article 61 that should there be conditions which are not conducive to holding an election, Parliament will decide when to hold it. That can be an amendment, but it's not necessary. Certain things are so obvious. Suppose we had an earthquake here that day before the elections, and everything was disturbed. Even the computers were mixed up. What would happen? Would we have to say we have to have elections, sun or rain? No, we would not. There would be a decision taken partly by the executive, partly by the legislature, to adjust the timetable for elections. So there is no reason, as far as I'm seeing, why Parliament cannot postpone the elections.
Yes, OHT, we've seen countries like United States of America who've been hit hard by the COVID-19 with lots of cases holding public rallies. We've noticed, we saw the president, the current president, Donald Trump, holding public rallies. Why is Uganda, don't you think Uganda has been quick to get the scientific rallies on board rather than holding on a little bit?
It may be an indirect admission that we don't have medical services. We have to take precautions right from the beginning to make sure the pandemic does not spread at all, because we do not have ability at all to take care of a massive attack of this virus. Whereas in America, they have the ability to do things like that. They can put up a hospital in 1 week and works. Here, it takes years. Even the years may not be enough. Mulago Hospital, the new Mulago Hospital, was built in 24 months only. It has taken more than 25 years to repair it, and it's not finished yet.
But we've seen Malawi doing the same.
Doing what?
The rallies.
Exactly. But as I have said, we have a government here which takes advantage of the situation. When I say government, I'm using government with a capital G. Government with a capital G is the administration, the incumbent, you know. The incumbent sees where the advantage lies and takes advantage of it. There's no doubt about it. By the way, he said at one time that if COVID-19 persists through June and reaches July, it will be madness for one to talk about elections. Has he changed from that?
No.
Probably not. So, and that did not mean that there will be no elections at all. It's like what he said the day before yesterday. He said the schools will not reopen for the time being. He said the churches and mosques will not reopen for the time being. And the bars. That does not mean that they have been given an indefinite period, that they will not open at all. They will not reopen at all. It means they will reopen, but at a certain time, which is in future, and which cannot be determined now because of the circumstances. In any case, the president could have said, okay, for another 30 days, the schools will not resume. Another 30 days, we will not open our bars and churches and mosques, in that order. And that would mean that at the end of the 30 days, we review the situation again. He will review the situation again and say, well, as we notice, when this measure was taken, we had only 700 coronavirus cases. Now we have 2,000. Now, since we have 2,000, it seems the number is growing. And if it's growing, maybe we should go for another 30 days, an extra 30 days of closing the schools, churches, and mosques. These are common things as the circumstances demand.
We've seen number of cases dropping. The number of recoveries are now many. Yesterday it was about 699 recoveries and about 700 active cases because they count them from day one. So that means Uganda itself has less than 100 people who have the COVID-19. Isn't there any hope of lots of things getting to loosen up during this period to help out on the Ugandans?
As I have said, we have a government which is held by a political party. What is the value, what is the purpose, what's the objective of any political party? To win elections and keep the power. Now, if you see a chance where you can keep the power, you take the chance. Here now, COVID-19 has given us a chance as member of the party to hold on to it, to hold on to power without being blamed. Because we are going to put a choice before the people and say, now you choose either die of this virus or to go for elections. And there's no value in holding elections when you're going to die anyway. So the best thing is to take the safe side. Now, that may not, that is the outside reason. But the inside reason is we want to remain in power for a while and we want to hold the elections when we are almost certain that we are not going to lose. I can't rule that out. And I can't say that's entirely wrong. It's a selfish nature of the affair, of the game.
Yes, OH Tiwa, it's been a great journey discussing all these issues with you. But before we wrap up the show, which message do you have for the Ugandans out there during this period so that they can keep that and change their lives during this COVID-19 pandemic?
I don't think that's that circumstances can change their lives within this short time only. What is required here is to have a more civilized way of governing ourselves, which we have not been able to achieve. And that is unfortunate. The indicator that we have not been able to achieve that is in the matter of the liberation wars that we have had. We have had turbulence in the country because of the way we have been governing ourselves. That means that we do not have, as yet, a constitution which is good enough to hold us together, to prevent us from having those wars, and to prevent us from having all the miseries that we have at the moment. My last word is that people have to find a way of reviewing this constitution and restructuring the most important part of it, that is the executive.